We've known for a long time that smoking can wreak havoc on your health, especially the health of your lungs. But did you know that the air you're breathing might be doing comparable damage in some parts of the country? Joining us now to break down the results of a new study, Sabrina Mully, health journalist. Welcome to the Damage Report.
Hi, thank you.
Glad to have you here. And so tell us about this study. How worried should we be?
Well, the study was done over the period of 18 years from 3 different universities, and they followed 7,000 people in metropolitan cities like Baltimore, New York City. And what they found was that the air pollution in these cities was so bad that it's akin to smoking a pack of cigarettes per day.
Wow, Oaks, that definitely stands out. In terms of the effect, like this study was on individual cities, but do we have any idea of this sort of pollution? How many people is it killing around the world? How significant of a problem is this?
So particularly with this study, what they found was that when they did the CT scans on the folks that they followed, the results of the CT scan, their lungs were severely damaged to the point where a lot of these people had emphysema-like symptoms. So emphysema is a disease that really destroys the air sacs of the lungs. And so it's usually found in smokers. So to have such a vast impact on the lungs when you're just breathing normal air is so significant.
Yeah, and it's really fascinating because the time span that you're talking about, this 18 years, is like roughly, at least in my mind, when we began to really take seriously smoking and we started to understand the health consequences of it. I don't necessarily hear the same message around air pollution. Was there anything in the study that indicated that things might be getting better over that time period, that cities or states might be taking it more seriously?
Well, what states are trying to do is they're trying to push the federal government to add more regulations. But like we know from the Trump administration or what's happening now, a lot of EPA regulations are getting rolled back, which is causing poor air quality. And since the Clean Air Act passed in the 60s, air quality has gotten better. But if we keep up this trend and if we keep rolling back regulations and the pollution is getting worse and worse, we're going to see a lot more lung-related diseases. And one thing to point out in this study, one of the researchers did find that it was incredible that the amount of lungs that were affected were for people who didn't smoke. So normal everyday people, are developing these smoker-related diseases.
Yeah, and so you mentioned those regulations. Let's give people a little bit more information. So you mentioned the Clean Air Act, that they are working on rolling that back. Just today, news broke that the next set of rollbacks on methane pollution are going to go forward. So even more contamination to the air. What about the EPA? Generally, that's been the area of the government that would be taking this seriously. Can we expect much out of them for the rest of the time that Donald Trump is president?
Well, at this time, I don't think so, for the mere fact that they are, like you said this morning, they're trying to roll back these EPA regulations on methane. And methane as itself is non-toxic, it's fine. But when it comes in high concentrated areas, when it's active in these areas, it can cause the depletion of oxygen, which obviously we need oxygen to breathe. So it will start to affect a lot of people and affect them drastically. And they're saying that this Obama era regulation is kind of an overstep in policy. And so what they're trying to do is roll it back and I guess let companies aside. And the funny thing is a lot of companies are in disagreement with this. A lot of fossil fuel companies are saying that no, the regulation should be there. And if they're not doing it, we're going to take the steps in our own hands.
Well, I hope that they do, and that stood out to me too. I mean, how often do you hear the government going beyond what the corporations actually want in terms of deregulation? That certainly stands out. Yeah. What could the federal government be doing if we had a different White House, if we had a different EPA? What could they be doing to reverse the trend that we see?
I guess better regulations. The only way this is going to be fixed, the only way to reduce carbon emissions is from a head down type of approach. It's a systemic approach. So yeah, maybe not driving your car everywhere might help on a small scale, but it's actually not going to help in a grander scale, in the larger scheme of things. We definitely need more regulations.
I'm curious, when we talk about carbon emissions and climate change, we generally talk about climate change specifically, but a lot of what we might do to fight climate change would also have the effect of reducing air pollution. Do you see that as a fruitful part of the conversation that perhaps should be pushed more? That if we talk about how getting rid of coal and oil and those sorts of things will make the air cleaner, is that a way to communicate to people around the issue of climate change that might not be a high priority for them?
I don't think that's going to work, honestly. It's because people aren't seeing these types of effects from the coal and oil emissions until it's starting to affect their health, which is why I think this study that came out is extremely important. People are, like I said, are developing lung cancer, are developing emphysema, are developing these diseases that you wouldn't see. And I think when it's starting to affect us on a human level, on an everyday level, this is when the conversation should be pushed. And this is when we're gonna start to see, I think, a change in people.
Sabrina Mully, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Here on the Damage Report, we talk a lot about the big banks and their ways of getting rich off the poor. They saturate the market, but there are other options. And I've got info on a socially and environmentally responsible financial institution that has no ATM fees, gives you cash back on every purchase. They even commit 10% of their earnings to charity. It's called Aspiration, and if you go to aspiration.com/TYT to sign up, you'll get these perks, and that's more money to spend or to save or to spend. Just treat yourself.